Metaphor ReFantazio is a pretty distinct game, but it's not totally unique. There are lots of other RPGs like it. Its main claim to fame is its blend of social sim elements and typical turn-based RPG battling. Even that, though, isn't a completely original concept and is part of a bigger formula that Atlus has stuck to for some time now, but when a player finishes Metaphor, as with any 80-plus hour RPG, it's easy to feel like there's a hole left in their heart. The only thing that can fill it is another RPG, something similar, but not something that's attempting to be exactly the same. That's where these 10 games come in. Each of them has an element that's similar to something in Metaphor ReFantazio, but maintain unique identities of their own. Number 1, Persona 5 Royal. It may seem a little obvious, but Persona 5 Royal and Metaphor ReFantazio share a lot of the same DNA. Each game in the Persona series since P3 has been divided into two halves, dungeon crawler and social sim. The player's performance in combat affects their relationships, and their relationships affect their abilities in combat. Besides that, Persona 5 and Metaphor share some common themes, with both centering on a group of people with a strong sense of justice. They even have similar combat mechanics. With summon spirits and bonuses for striking enemy weaknesses, their characters and settings are entirely different, with Persona 5 focusing on a group of teenagers in a modern city, and Metaphor on the royal guards of a fairy tale kingdom, but the truth is that Metaphor draws a lot on Persona 5. Being a recent release by the same developer, Atlus, if it wasn't the driving force behind a player's interest in Metaphor, it makes a worthy successor available on Nintendo Switch, PC, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, Xbox Series S. Number 2, Shin Megami Tensei V Vengeance, and before there was Persona, there was Shin Megami Tensei SMT, is a long-running series in which players collect and summon friendly demons in order to fight less friendly demons. It's known for its often crushing difficulty philosophical story and choice-based endings. In many ways, it inspired Persona, which borrows a lot of the demon designs and an adapted combat system from the SMT series. In turn, SMT inspired much about Metaphor ReFantazio, including one central element of its combat system: the press turn mechanic. This is the reason that players have limited actions on each turn and why each critical hit or exploited weakness results in only a half turn being consumed. With the extended warm-up provided by Metaphor, players should be ready to dive into the greater difficulty of Shin Megami Tensei, and there's no better place to start than the most recent entry, SMTV, available on Nintendo Switch, PC, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, Xbox Series X, Box Series S, Box Series S, Xbox One. Number 3, Visions of Mana. One of the cooler but less talked about aspects of Metaphor ReFantazio is how flexible its character builds, or players can effectively swap their archetypes at will, completely changing a character's strengths, abilities, and stats with the press of a single button. It's a game all about discovering unique party synergies by experimenting with archetypes, which both keeps combat interesting and creates satisfyingly overpowered combinations. Visions of Mana has a similar class system, with 45 different classes to choose from. Swapping them out is as easy as equipping the right elemental vessel, and completely changes a character's playstyle. Players are free to experiment with different synergies among its 8 characters, finding a unique combination that works for them in each battle. The one major difference is that Visions of Mana has real-time, not turn-based combat, which leads to some thrilling fights where timing and positioning matter as much as having the right class equipped. Available on PC, PS4, PS5, Xbox Series X, Xbox Series S. Number 4, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, also under the Sega umbrella, is the series formerly known as Yakuza in English, but more recently renamed Like a Dragon in order to accommodate a wider variety of stories. The first game to take on the Like a Dragon moniker introduced a new protagonist, Ichiban Kasuga, and a new turn-based battle system in which players swap jobs to alter their stats and abilities. Not unlike in Metaphor's archetype system, players must level up their personalities much as they level up their royal virtues in Metaphor. It also includes a variety of fleshed out, sometimes entire game-size side activities. This was shortly followed by Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, a Hawaii-set sequel that builds on much of what the first Like a Dragon introduces. It even has a more robust social simulator, allowing players to say aloha to almost anyone on the street. Over time, this levels up their relationships, earning them points that they can spend on gear at a specialized shop. It also includes an Animal Crossing-inspired minigame, Dondoko Island, a worthy distraction from the main story. Available on PS5, PS4, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, PC. Number 5, Suikoden 1-2 HD Remaster Gate Rune and Dune and Unification Wars, originally released for the PlayStation 1. Suikoden 1 and 2 are mainly known for their oversized cast of characters. Each has 108 different party members to recruit. Much as archetypes promote unique party synergies in Metaphor, these diverse rosters promote party synergies in Suikoden, encouraging players to experiment with different combinations of characters in order to suit different situations. Their respective plots are also similar, revolving around heroes who gather supporters in order to take down corrupt governments. Unfortunately, Suikoden 1 and 2 aren't currently playable on modem platforms, but they will be soon. A full remaster of the first 2 games in the series has been announced for the Switch, PC, PlayStation consoles, and Xbox consoles. It'll be released on March 6, 2025 for now. Interested players can check out the spiritual successor Eiyuden Chronicles, released earlier this year with the participation of Suikoden creator Yoshitaka Murayama. It's available on all the same platforms available on Nintendo Switch, PC, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, Xbox Series, Xbox Series S, Xbox One. Number 6, Bravely Default 2. Bravely Default 2 is a sort of Final Fantasy successor with a heavy emphasis on the job system in it. Each character is given a job that works similarly to Metaphor's archetypes, defining their abilities and stats. Players collect more asterisks as they travel the world, unlocking new classes that help them beat new enemy types. They can also equip secondary jobs from those they've already studied, gaining access to an additional set of skills. This creates useful synergies not only between characters, but within a single character assigned to 2 different classes. There are also a variety of secret jobs to be found throughout. Unfortunately, Bravely Default 2 requires a great deal of grinding, which is something that Metaphor avoids. Players can defeat enemies weaker than them in its real-time preludes to turn-based combat, which saves a ton of time and energy when it comes to leveling up. Still, there's something to be said for the satisfaction that grinding can provide, and if a player doesn't mind the repetition, there's a lot to love in Bravely Default 2, available on Switch, PC. Number 7, Octopath Traveler 2. Octopath Traveler 2 is cut from the same cloth as Bravely Default. Made by a similar development team, it also relies, in part, on the job system, although each character has a default class, not unlike in Metaphor. ReFantazio, secondary jobs are much more important. Then, as characters level up along set paths besides the skills the player buys with their JP, the secondary jobs they equip are basically their only customization options. What makes Octopath 2 more like Metaphor, though, is its increased focus on the characters, although it's not a full-blown social sim. Each character has a personal quest that players can progress throughout the main story. These unfold in stages, not unlike Metaphor's bonds, with characters gradually getting closer to one another over time. Also like Metaphor, it's got a thrilling battle system focused on hitting enemy weaknesses, a memorable character design, and an excellent OS to underscore it all, available on Switch, PS4, PS5, PC. Number 8, Final Fantasy XII, The Zodiac Age. Another game with a unique iteration on the job system is Final Fantasy XII, re-released for modern platforms as The Zodiac Age. In this one, characters level up and gain new abilities by progressing on the job board. A virtual grid that looks and works a lot like Metaphor's skill tree jobs are almost every bit as flexible as archetypes. Players do have to return to a hub area to change classes. There are also secondary jobs that allow for skill inheritance for Metaphor fans, however. Getting used to FF12's combat might be a little difficult. It uses an auto attack system where players input special moves using an in-game menu. This is bolstered by the brilliant Gambit system, which allows players to set complex sets of if-then statements that guide AI-controlled characters in combat. Gambits grow over time, allowing players to develop in-depth strategies like the party synergies in Metaphor, then automate them for easy reuse, available on Nintendo Switch, PC, PlayStation 4, Xbox One. Number 9, Final Fantasy XIII. Final Fantasy XIII then takes the Gambit system introduced in 12 and pushes it even further. This time, any character can switch jobs at any time, even in the middle of combat. Instead of setting jobs individually, though, players create paradigms, each a unique combination of character classes that brings about a particular party combo. For example, players might use the divide and conquer paradigm to stagger an enemy, then swap to the pure damage slash and burn once it's down. The result is that combat is all about party synergy, just like Metaphor's choice of archetypes. In addition, FF13 also revolves around members of an oppressed class, the LCI, with incredible magical powers. They use these powers to fight against a corrupt, theocratic government that somewhat resembles Metaphor's Sanctus. Just be warned that the story of FF13 is spread across 3 separate games. Not all of them equally well received, but there's a lot of good in there. 2 available on PS3, Xbox 360, PC. Number 10, Chrono Cross. The Radical Dreamers Edition Chrono Cross is technically a sequel to the all-time great RPG Chrono Trigger, but don't worry. It's not necessary to play the original first, featuring a unique story that revolves around the player party's interdimensional travels and a severe case of mistaken identity. It uses a distinct battle system that, while completely different from Metaphor's, is similar in its flexibility. Instead of gaining experience points, players win abilities called elements as the spoils of battle. They can then place these elements in a grid, which they must proceed through level by level. This creates a fascinating strategic game, requiring players to adapt to each individual character's unique grid layout and place the element tiles they receive carefully. In addition, there are absolutely no experience points, random encounters, or levels in Chrono Cross. Instead, characters gain levels at pivotal story moments. Basically, whenever they defeat a boss, its anti-grinding stance makes Chrono Cross an excellent title for fans of Metaphor. ReFantazio, available on Nintendo Switch, PC, PlayStation 4, Xbox One. Number 11, Dungeons of Hinterberg. One element that helps Metaphor ReFantazio stand out from other Atlas JRPGs before it is the litany of mini dungeons sprinkled in between larger undertakings. If you love these low commitment dungeons and want some light time management mixed in too, then Dungeons of Hinterberg is well worth trying. Contextualized as our hero's holiday to get away from their day-to-day jobs, Dungeons of Hinterberg will challenge you with 25 mini dungeons focused more on puzzle solving, with some combat sprinkled in every now and then. It's much shorter than Metaphor ReFantazio, so if you want something quick, it's a great pick. Available on Xbox Series X, Xbox Series S, PC. Number 12, while they have a drastically different look, the feel of playing through the second part of the Final Fantasy Remake trilogy in Metaphor. ReFantazio is surprisingly similar. Both feature a party of heroes traveling between semi-open areas of a wider continent on their adventures while learning about the citizens of each settlement they pass through. The main difference is Rebirth's signature strategic take on action gameplay, which is fun to learn but tricky to master thanks to the focus on timing. Following Cloud and his friends is plenty of fun, but it is recommended to play the more linear first part of the remake before to ensure you're up to date with the story. Available on PlayStation 5. Number 13, Dragon Quest XI. If you loved getting to know a lovable party of characters and the refined turn-based combat of Metaphor ReFantazio, then Dragon Quest XI is the perfect entry point to the series, and features a more classic-feeling JRPG adventure that is easy to move on to next, while your party is a little less customizable and the progression is more linear. Exploring the world of Dragon Quest XI is consistently engaging, and you'll be surprised by both the unpredictable narrative and by just how much you'll be invested in each of the individual party members. PS4, PC, Xbox One, 3DS, Stadia. Number 14, Eternites. While Eternites was criticized before it even released as seeming to be a lower budget take on Persona, it ended up being a lovingly made, while still undeniably lower budget action RPG that takes inspiration from Persona's social stats and calendar system to make a more condensed adventure. The dodge-based action is snappy and satisfying, and feels like an extension of the overworld combat in Metaphor ReFantazio. Your growing connections with your party members result in tactile buffs to the combat, and the more explicit focus on the romance aspect makes it feel a lot less tacked on than it does in some entries of the Persona series. Available on PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch, PC. Number 15, Gravity Rush. While the gameplay of Gravity Rush and Metaphor ReFantazio are quite different, with the former's unconventional action contrasting the latter's turn-based RPG, their style and atmosphere are incredibly similar also. If you loved exploring the winding streets of Grand Trad especially, and want a more open-ended version of this, then Gravity Rush is the answer. The core of it is Cat's gravity bending powers, which make exploring the diverse steampunk-style city feel liberating. While the adventure is quite open-ended thanks to how freeform the method of traversal is, you'll get invested in the story, and if you're left wanting even more, the sequel is just that, with a longer, more detailed experience. Available on PS4, PS Vita. Number 16, Balers Gate 3. One of the biggest strengths of Metaphor ReFantazio is how alive and detailed the world feels thanks to Atlas' dedication to world building. And if you want another detailed fantasy world that leans into the fantasy of it all, then Balers Gate 3 is easy to move on to being a similarly lengthy adventure. Balers Gate 3 stands out thanks to its Dungeons and Dragons inspired combat. If you found yourself occasionally frustrated by the linearity of Metaphor ReFantazio's overall narrative, Then Balder's Gate will give you the chance to truly craft your own path in its world, available on PC, macOS, PS5, Xbox Series X,